Okay, if you come up on a lock like this is a Kwikset lock, and you see this little slot here, this is a smart lock. And I know on YouTube there are people that claim they can pick this lock open or they can force it open. But what I want you to know is that there is more than one version of this lock, that Kwikset has continued to rework this lock, and I know there's at least 2 versions, there could be more than 2 versions, but the newer smart locks cannot be picked. I would say they're next to impossible to pick. The old ones can be, but they're very difficult. The old ones could be forced open if you knew how to do it, but the new ones I don't believe can be forced without destroying the lock. So if you come up on one of these, I do not advise to waste time even trying to pick it or to force it. I would drill it. It does have a sidebar. It's a hybrid lock. The way it goes together is it goes into the housing here, and then there's a clip that you just take off, and then you take the clip off right here, it just pops right off to take the plug out. Anyway, there's another clip here that holds this in here. And see if this will slide out. This is really a hybrid lock. It has parts of a pin tumbler and parts of a wafer lock, and then it also has a sidebar. And has a ball bearing that was right here for drill protection. It's got one on each side. Here's the sidebar here. I'm going to take the sidebar out. Now then, you just, on this piece here, you just push it down towards the spring. And it will come up free, like so. Okay, so when I remove the wafer side of the lock, you can see the pins. And if I push a key in to the cylinder, this key is cut at 14233, it looks like. Push it in there, you're going to see those pins move up. See, they all moved up. And if you'll notice here, these lips on these pins, this is what grabs the little wafers and pulls the wafers up, so that when you pull those up, it aligns the wafers in the correct spot to allow the sidebar to retract into the plug. We'll look at it more in a later course, but it does have a sidebar here, and I would drill it in this area right here, back, you can see the sidebar here, back to the end of the sidebar. In other words, basically back to the end of a key blade. Drill it that far, and then you can just drill the whole center of the lock, but do not drill it too far and drill the tail piece off. That's going to just cause more trouble. And we'll talk more about drilling locks in a later course. But for right now, I just want you to know that there's more than one version of this lock, and the new versions are very, very difficult, if not impossible, to pick open, and to try to force them will usually destroy them. Just to summarize the Kwikset Smart Lock, the older style lock could be forced open. It could also be picked, but it was very difficult to pick. The newer style lock is basically pick proof. The newer style probably can be forced, but it would most likely destroy the lock. To be able to pick locks takes practice. If you stop doing it, you'll probably lose your touch. So continue to practice as much as possible, and practice on as many different types of locks as possible. Begin to acquire tools, picks, tension wrenches, key extractor, pick guns, etc. Collect as many different types of locks as you can. Practice picking the locks. Start with 3 or less pin stacks and add pin stacks when you are ready. Be sure to comply with the legal requirements in your area for doing lockouts.
You can usually find this information from the same office that issues your locksmith business license. If you have any doubts, consult an attorney. That concludes the basic skills portion of this course. If you would like to learn more about the history of locks, please continue with this bonus section. We are going to learn about the development of the lever tumbler lock. We're going to review the slide bolt. We're going to look at the single lever tumbler lock. We'll look at Robert Barron's multi-lever lock. We'll look at Chubb's multi-lever lock. We'll learn about Alfred C. Hobbs, and we'll also learn about Solomon Andrews and Robert Newell.
You recall that in the last course we talked about the history of the warded lock and the slide bolt, and we talked about how on the bottom of the slide bolt that in time they put a couple of notches and they would have something to hold the slide bolt in the locked or unlocked position, and as the key came in and turned, it would pick the slide bolt up and move it back a little bit. Well, after a while, and we're not really sure exactly when, someone came up with the idea that maybe to make this lock more pick resistant, they could put a couple of notches on the top and do something very similar in that there would be some type of lever that would be attached to the wall and pivot down, and so it may look something like this. And then when in the lock position there would be a lug, which was referred to as a stump originally, that would be connected to this lever. And then as the key came in and turned, it would also, the key would pick up the bolt, but it would also pick up this lever to move this stump up out of this notch and again allow the bolt to slide back and align itself with the other notch again to help hold the lock in the open position. And that would have been the first lever tumbler lock. Here's another drawing to illustrate how the lever would work. Here we have the key and it's turning and it's moving the bolt out going this direction here, and as the key turns, it picks the lever up, which frees the stump out of this first notch, and then it will, as you continue to turn and push the lever out, this notch will come up underneath where the stump is and the lever will drop back down, putting the stump back in that notch and holding the slide bar in that position. Here you can see the bolt out and the stump on the end of the lever back in the notch here. In France, in 1767, a paper on locksmithing was published called The Art of the Locksmith that described a lever tumbler lock. So we know that lever tumbler locks existed by that year. 11 years later, Robert Barron, an Englishman, patented a lock which included double-acting tumblers as well as wards. The lever tumbler was a significant improvement in security over the standard warded lock. The Barron lock had 2 tumblers, and the key had to raise each tumbler by a different amount before the bolt could be retracted. This is a drawing of the Robert Barron lock that was patented in 1778, and he did 2 things that were very significant. One, he had added another tumbler. He had 2 tumblers, and they had to be raised to different heights, so the key would have to be adjusted for the 2 different heights. The second thing he did was he had his tumblers be double acting tumblers, in that if they were raised too high, they would relock the lock by catching these teeth up here in the top of the bolt. Here you can see a drawing with the levers raised to the correct height, and these stumps, as they're called, which were attached to the levers, would be in this gap or this gateway so that the bolt could move and the key could push the bolt into the locked position. Now notice that the bolt has been cut out, and the stumps on the levers move up and down inside this area that has been cut out of the bolt. In 1817, the dockyards at Portsmouth, England were burglarized. As a result of that crime, the British Crown offered a reward to anyone who could make a pick-proof lock. In 1817, as a result of the offer by the British Crown, which I mentioned earlier, Jeremiah Chubb of Portsmouth, England, went to work to make a pick-proof lock. In 1818, he patented a Lever Tumbler Lock, which proved to be good enough to win the prize offered by the British Crown. Chubb improved on the Lever Tumbler Lock by incorporating what he called a detector. The detector was a retaining spring, which acted as a relock device. Here we have a drawing of the Chubb's lock. Here's the levers here. You see the pattern with the gateway in the middle of the levers. You see the stump on the side of the bolt. The bolt is unlocked right now. It's in the open position. And the difference is, you had more levers, and you also had tighter tolerances with this lock, but we had the addition of this detector device up at the top up here. And you can see that the levers have a little protrusion here that if you push this too high, it will cause this lever to push up here and then come down over here and grab the bolt in this notch right here. There was a spring that would hold it there. So that's basically the way that worked. Here you can see the bolt. Currently it's moving towards being locked in the locked position. The stump on the side of the bolt is passing through the gateway. The detector device is still not engaged, and the lock is functioning properly. Once the detector device was engaged like that, you would have to have the correct key to unlock the lock. Now you'll notice in the Chubb's lock that it is the levers that have the cutout and not the bolt like we saw in the Barron's lock. And this is the same basic design that we see today. The cutout, the traps that hold the lug or the stump are in the lever. Okay, this is a Lever Tumbler lock. It's a brand new lock. You can see the bolt. You can see the levers here. You can see the post it's attached. And you can see that how the levers are cut out. That this is the same basic design that we saw in the Chubb's lock. It is still used today. I want to talk about a guy by the name of Alfred C. Hobbs for just a minute, and then we'll take a look at the company he worked for. The story of Alfred Hobbs is somewhat long and quite interesting. I do not have time to talk about all of his accomplishments, but I want to share part of them and then encourage you to do more research on this individual. To put it simply, Alfred Hobbs was probably one of the world's greatest lockpickers. In April of 1851, he boarded the steamship Washington bound for Southampton, England, with his own set of lockpicks. His official assignment was to sell a new lock called the peritoptic lock, which was the newest lock developed by his employer, the New York City-based company of Day and Newell. He was to sell this lock at a trade show in London, London's Great Exhibition of 1851. Of all the locks at the Great Exhibition in July of 1851, the Chubb detector lock was thought to be the top of the class. According to an official report, soon after the exhibition opened, Mr. Hobbs obtained one of the Chubb detector locks and opened it in a space of 10 or 15 minutes in the presence of several gentlemen. The Chubb company challenged Hobbs to try a more difficult task. The Chubb's lock attached to an iron door of a vault in Westminster that was a depository for valuable papers. Hobbs accepted the challenge and invited the company to watch. Hobbs met his skeptical onlookers at the chosen location. He took out his picks and went to work. Within 25 minutes, he had the lock opened. He had once again successfully picked a supposedly pick-proof Chubb lock. He was asked to do it again, so he relocked the lock and picked it again a second time within 7 minutes. Needless to say, with the reputation of the Chubb lock on the line, this caused quite a commotion. Later that summer, Hobbs also picked the Brom Precision lock, which had never been picked since it was manufactured in 1790. Hobbs invented his own lock, which he called the Protector, and started his own company to manufacture and sell that lock. In somewhat of a turnabout, the Hobbs lock was picked by a Chubb's locksmith in 1854. I want to mention two other people, both Americans, who made significant contributions to the lever lock. The first, Solomon Andrews, a New Jersey locksmith, designed this lock right here and patented it in 1836. Now this is designed for a safe vault. And what was unique about this is the first really rekeyable lock. And the way he did it, he has two sets of levers. There's a primary set up here alongside the bolt, and then there's a secondary set that are arched levers, which you see back behind this plate right here. And I've never actually seen one of these locks other than a picture or a drawing. And my understanding is of the way it works is that these secondary levers can be fairly easily taken out and rearranged to rekey the lock. The key was also unique in that the bitting on the key was rekeyable. In other words, the bits could be rearranged. This is the key that Solomon Andrews came up with, and it has a square shank that these bits slide over. There's a screw on the end, this piece comes off, and then the bits would slide off. And the bits had a square hole in them. You would simply slide them over the square shaft and align them in such a way as they correlate with the tumblers. All of the bits were numbered so that if you had a number 3 tumbler, you would get a number 3 bit in the same location. Now the other unique thing that he did was, if you wanted to simply do a quick rekey, he had these spacers that you could add. And if the lock were in the open position and you added a spacer to your key and closed the lock, that would basically rekey it. You could only open it with the spacer in the correct location. So that again was a unique feature of this Solomon Andrews lock. He called this lock the combination lock. The original lock only had 13 lever tumblers in it, but in 1842 he upgraded the lock to have 17 levers, and he also included a Chubb-style detector. Another safe lock designer, Robert Newell, a partner in the New York firm of Day and Newell, invented a lock which is known as the peritoptic lock. The lock used 2 sets of tumblers, which were more interactive than what Andrews had designed. It also incorporated a plate that revolved with the key and prevented the inspection of the interior of the lock. This prevented the lock picker from being able to see up inside the lock. Like the Andrews lock, the peritoptic lock also had interchangeable bits. Now this is a picture of a drawing of a peritoptic key, and the way it worked, this would come apart. There was kind of a carriage here that had the pins in here, and this would slide off. There was a pin that went through the center of the bits also. You take it out, and then you could rearrange the bits. And of course you want to do this, with the lock in the open position. You rearrange your bits, and then you close the lock back. And what was significant about the peritoptic lock is that the lever tumblers would automatically adjust to this new key bitting when you closed the lock. So you did not have to take the case off the cover and remove the tumblers inside the lock at all. The peritoptic lock is probably one of the most complicated lever tumbler locks ever made. And just as a side note, there is a YouTube video on YouTube right now that shows an actual working peritoptic lock. I'd encourage you to take a look at that.
Let's review what we learned in this section on the history of locks. We know that the lever tumbler lock existed in 1767 because in that year a French treatise, The Art of the Locksmith, described many examples of lever tumbler locks. We do not know when the first lever tumbler lock was made, nor who made it. In 1778, Robert Barron, an Englishman, patented a lever tumbler lock with significant improvements. It used 2 levers. The levers were double acting, and each lever had to be raised to a different height. As a result of a break-in, in 1817, the British Crown offered a reward for a pick-proof lock. Jeremiah Chubb invented a lock that was good enough to win the prize in 1818. The Chubb lock had several improvements over the Barron lock. It used 6 levers, had improved precision of manufacturing, and it included what he called a detector, which was similar to a relock device. In 1851, Alfred C. Hobbs of New York picked the Chubb detector lock at the London exhibition. In 1836, Solomon Andrews, a New Jersey locksmith, received a patent for a bank vault lock with these features. It contained 13 primary and 13 secondary levers. Tumblers and key bits were designed to be accessible by the owner. It allowed for a quick rekey by using spacers in place of key bits. It allowed the owner to completely rekey the lock by rearranging the tumblers in the lock and the bits on the key, making this the first rekeyable lock. In 1842, Andrews upgraded the lock to use 17 tumblers and a Chubb-style detector. Robert Newell, another American inventor, received a patent in 1844 for what he called the peritoptic lock. The lock's features include: it used 2 sets of lever tumblers, it had a revolving plate to prevent the inspection of the interior of the lock, the key had interchangeable bits, and the tumblers would automatically adjust to a new key bitting. That concludes this course. I want to thank you for buying this course. We hope you found it informative. Please take just a moment to like the video and also subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.